So now please welcome Richard, co-founder of SAFE, to share about On the Road Toward Account Abstraction. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks for the introduction. Happy to be here, to be in Tokyo and at EDCON. Yeah, I'm Richard. I'm one of the founders of the SAFE project, and today I want to talk about account abstraction. But before we get into account abstraction, I want to iterate a little bit on why are we at SAFE working on account abstraction and smart accounts, and why do we think this is so important? And it's actually that we think that being able to own something is a fundamental right that everybody has and that everybody needs to be able to exercise. And we're actually not alone with this. It's part of the Human Declaration of Human Rights that everybody should be able to own property, be it alone or together with others, and that it should not be possible to arbitrarily deprive him of this property. And this is why we think that it is so important to have smart accounts, to have account abstraction, to have blockchain. And this is also why we believe that smart accounts are the future. They will help us create a world where everybody can exercise this right to ownership. But today I want to go actually one step further, and I actually want to show you some examples why this future is actually today, right? Like, it's already now. We have a lot of tools that allow us to build like applications where the users fully owns the product. Let's start with some basics, right? Like at SAFE, we started 2017, we started building multi-signature because we believe that with multi-signature wallets, you already bring a lot of flexibility and security towards the users so that they can really fully own a product. And there are two parts in multi-signature. There's, on one side, we have the signers, and they basically approve which transaction should be executed. And then on the other side, we have a threshold, which basically said how many of these signers do we require to execute one of the transactions. Let's take a look at a little bit more concrete example. Let's say we have a smart account that has 3 signers represented by the green keys here, and we want to execute a transaction and have a threshold of 2, and that's where we see that 2 of these signers confirm this transaction, which is then transmitted towards the smart account that executes it. This already brings us a lot of flexibility because if we think about an individual, what we can do here is that we say, hey, let's implement multi-factor authentications. That's what we're used to from the Web 2 world. We want that we have a high level of security and that we require more than one confirmation, or that we can also rotate our keys. But you can also utilize this to really build or manage funds as a team, be it a smaller team like a VC fund or a bigger team like a DAO. Another thing that smart accounts really enable is that they allow relaying. So in the case of relaying, what you can do here is that you take the signed transaction and you hand it over to a third party. And this third party, the relayer, then submits it to your smart account. In this case, the relayer is responsible for how do we create an Ethereum transaction, how do we pay for the Ethereum transaction, and in turn they can get refunded by the smart account. This allows us to really abstract away a lot of the complexity that comes with Ethereum, right? Like we have to understand gas prices, gas limits, and so on, and all of this is now handled by the relayer. In turn, relayers are often very centralized parties that create an additional risk that you have to trust as parties that they submit your transaction. ERC-4337 worked a lot on reducing the centralization risk by replacing the relayers with bundlers and paymasters, right? Like, so we have a decentralized network where you can just submit your transaction towards 2, and therefore you have a higher guarantee, a higher resilience that your transaction gets executed. 4337 achieves this by decoupling the submission, the verification, and the execution, so that you can really sign your transaction, give it to somebody else, and execute it, and you have this really decentralized execution of smart account transactions. Most of the smart accounts nowadays support 4337, and this gives you already one of the big advantages where you can choose how do you want to pay for a transaction. Do you want to pay it with the ETH stored in the safe? Do you want to use some ERC20 token? Or do you even want that some debt can sponsor your transaction, right? Like, this flexibility is really what allows us to push the boundaries of UX. Another thing, a little bit more advanced, when we look into the smart accounts, is message signing. I think most of you if you have used any of the dApps, have come along across this with your MetaMask account. And how it normally works is that you have your private key, and when you log into a dApp, for example, the dApp gives you a message saying, please sign this message saying, I'm logging in into dApp XYZ. And then you basically take the signature and give it to a dApp, which then can utilize the signature to recover your public key from it, which where you can derive an address from. And then you can basically compare, is the connected address the same as this recovered address? And therefore you are basically then authorized into this step. The challenge here is that you cannot do this with smart accounts. Like, smart accounts don't have private keys, and therefore it's impossible to generate like the signature that you can recover from. So an alternative was proposed, which is called contract signatures, and which are like, these are defined in ERC-1271. And here, let's go through the flow, right? Like on the left side, it actually starts very similar. We have our multi-signature setup where we have like 3 keys again, where we need 2 of them sign the message. And then we have this aggregated signature that we can give over to the dApp. But now, instead of recovering the owners from the signature, basically the dApp is going towards the smart account and asking, is this aggregated signature valid for your smart account? And here, then, the smart account can take apart the signature again, checks it against the owners, and returns to the dApp, yes, it's either valid or no, it's not valid. The magic part is actually that you do not have to follow this multi-signature scheme here, right? Like, you could have your smart account implement any arbitrary signature validation logic, which allows you to say, for specific dApps, I utilize different signature validation logic than my default. A very nice example that I want to present for this is time-weighted average price orders used with CowSwap. So what we're doing here is, like, these TWAP orders are like used to reduce the price slippage on very, very large orders, right? Like, let's say I want to buy 1 million I want to buy cow tokens worth 1 million USDC. So to avoid that this changes the price too much, I say I want to buy them over a time period of 2 hours in an interval of 20 minutes. And each of these smaller trades, I only want to spend like 27 cents per cow token. So now what I do, in the past I would have to do this very manually, but with smart accounts you can basically automate this. You go to your TWAP contract, you tell the TWAP contract, hey, these are my parameters as I defined them before. And then by publishing it to the TWAP contract, this can be picked up by the solvers inside the cow protocol. And the cow protocol then basically takes these smaller orders that happen 6 times every 20 minutes, where we buy roughly 167,000 tokens, cow tokens worth of USDC, and they submit it to CowSwap. And CowSwap now can then go to the smart contract and ask, hey, did you verify this order? And now, since we have this custom verification logic, we can go to our TWAP contract, and this TWAP contract can just tell us, hey, yes, this is part of my TWAP order. You still have not completed your full package of the TWAP order, and therefore we can verify this very smart part. This way, instead of having the user to sign 6 times for like the smaller orders or having to put their funds into an escrow contract, here we sign once and the funds are still only moving out of our smart account once we actually fulfill the smaller trades. CowSwap was actually writing this in a way that you can implement all other kinds of orders, and you can even use it outside of CowSwap, so you can also build your own protocol that uses these custom signing logics. So recommend to check this out. Another thing where you can use signature verification is actually not only when it comes to signing messages, but when it also comes to signing signature transactions, right? Like here, I'm same example as before. We have 3 owners, but now one of these owners is a smart account. It's not a private key. And now when we want to verify a safe transaction, we can see that the smart account actually validates this signature against the smart account. Why this is cool is because this allows us to implement custom logic here. And then we have in the smart account, for example, we can implement a P P256 verifier that allows us to use passkeys when execute normal transactions. So now we have a special smart account, like the implementation of the P256 verifier in Solidity that is utilized in this flow, and whenever the user has to sign a transaction, they actually get presented with this very common Web 2-like experience where they have to confirm it via their passkeys. And since passkeys is one of these technologies that is being pushed in Web 2 by Google and Apple, it actually allows us to onboard a huge chunk of new users with hardware wallets. This allows us to really tap into existing hardware key devices, hardware security devices. This might be password managers, but also YubiKeys. But essentially, and most importantly, it's mobile phones. Basically, everybody of you who is running around with a modern mobile phone has a hardware key inside their pockets, but it's hard to utilize them since we are not really optimized on the right cryptographic curves. Also here, if you want to play around with it, I recommend you to check out the demo because it just showcases you how easy it is to onboard right now into crypto. Another thing that I want to look at, because it's, in my opinion, the most powerful feature of smart accounts, is guards and modules. Modules are a form that you can have additional execution flows outside of this multi-signature flow that I mentioned before. So here we can have session keys where we allow third parties to execute transactions via our smart accounts, or allowances where we have lower security assumptions. And guards are a way where we can basically limit what transaction can be executed so that we can perform additional security checks or compliance checks before a transaction can get executed. There's a very nice example where you can see how powerful these two can be used together, and that is actually Gnosis Pay. So Gnosis Pay, what they provide is like this little credit card with which I can use the funds that are stored on my safe account, right? Like, so it's a normal safe account. I have 2 out of 3 owners, and the only special thing is that there is a guard enabled that delays all transactions. So I have to wait 3 minutes before I can execute any transactions. And why this is important, you will see in a second. So when I now go to a shop and I use my credit card, what actually is happening is that this terminal at the shop will utilize the Visa network to go to Gnosis Pay and ask like, hey, do you like pay for the users? Because they have to guarantee that the store gets their fund. The challenge here is that they have to respond to this request in a very short time, in like sub-seconds in the best time. And this is normally where blockchain is not that fast yet, right? Like even on the layer 1s, we take some time to submit the transaction and to settle it. So here, the 3 minutes come into play, where we really say, since Gnosis Pay knows that for 3 minutes the smart account cannot change its state, they can now say, according to the current state, we can cover it, and then they have 3 minutes time to bring this transaction on chain and actually settle my debt that I created with my credit card. So this is really where you can see that this flexibility of smart accounts allows us to connect the Web 2 and the Web 3 world, and that we can utilize like our crypto funds also in the Web 2 world. But this is only one of the many examples. I think in general smart accounts can give you anything when it comes to automation, but they can also like represent complex hierarchies inside smart accounts. And it will also be one of the important tools when it comes to post-quantum signature schemes where we really want to push forward and can utilize smart accounts. But to really make sure that we as an ecosystem can build together in the smart accounts, we have to make sure that we align on certain standards. And this is also where one of these standards is ERC 7579, where it's really around, okay, we have validators that allow us to, for the signature schemes, we have hooks that are where we can have security checks, executors to provide additional execution paths, and also fallback handlers to extend our accounts. So if this all is so cool, and if I'm saying, hey, look, we have projects building this, why is not everybody using smart accounts? Why is not everybody outside in the world using blockchain? It is because there's actually some fine print. I mean, I'm not sure if you can, you can actually read it on screen. But like, there are a couple challenges, there are some conditions attached to it. One of them is that most of this only works with very selected interfaces right now. It's actually not that easy that you can just take your smart account, go to any dApp and interact with this. But also these are things that the teams are working on. And there are two areas here. The first area is that it's being pushed that existing ERCs gain more adoption. ERC 1271 has been around for a long time, but it took a lot of effort to really push projects to adopt towards 1271. And now with also the continued adoption of 4337, the pattern of counterfactual accounts is becoming more and more used, which increases the challenge to push dApps to support these patterns and to really support these accounts. Another challenge is how do you connect really the dApps towards the smart accounts in a way that they can utilize all of this AA functionality, like this smart account functionality. And this is really where also there has been a lot of ERCs around for a while. ERC 5792 really was working on this connection where how can I send batches of transaction? How can I understand what features does the wallet that I connect to actually support? One of the recent ERCs in this regard is ERC 7715, which basically allows dApps to request this permission that I can basically execute transaction without having to do a confirmation every time. A second problem is that all of these are only ERCs, so these are more recommendations. It's not enforced in the consensus layer, and this is really where we have to push forward further. One of the things that is being currently discussed and is a candidate for the next hard fork is EIP 7212, which basically introduces a new cryptographic curve as a precompile to Ethereum, which will make it a lot cheaper to use passkeys, but will also make it a lot safer. And since we have one canonical solution now that we have to use, and we do not have to deploy our own Solidity contract solution. Another one is EIP 7702, where really this is an EIP that will bring EOAs and smart accounts closer together. It will make some of the smart account features available to EOAs, and these can therefore then be used by the dApps more commonly because they do not have to choose between, hey, do we want to support EOAs as an existing user base, or do we want to fully utilize the powers of smart accounts on the other side. How this works is that basically EOAs can set implementation, they can delegate their logic towards a smart account, and then each time somebody interacts with EOA, they basically behave like that smart account. And last but not least, now that we bring EOAs and smart accounts closer together, we also have to continue push native AA. It is really important here. We have seen 4337 as a tool that builds on top of the existing Ethereum layer, but we should not stop there. We really have to make sure that the rules that are set by 4337 are really enforced by the consensus layer. And here we really want to push forward that with RIP 7560, where this is enforced first on the rollups and the layer 2s, where then the sequences enforce these rules and push this forward. But this will also enable that when enough of the layer 2s showcase that this is viable, that we can push native AA also towards the Ethereum mainnet account. But even if we solve all of these coordination issues and all of these standardization issues, we are still in an ecosystem where we are constantly evolving, where we're constantly changing. And we're currently in a state where the users and the liquidity moves from a handful of networks where it's supported towards a landscape where we have hundreds, if not even thousands of networks where users are currently active and are spreading their liquidity. And there it's really important that we work together as a team and that we work together as an ecosystem to utilize smart accounts to make this a good experience. I hope I could show you a little bit like why smart accounts are cool and why we should push further for account abstraction, and also why account abstraction already enables nowadays a lot of the things that we might think are still far off in the future. And I also hope that some people take this as an initiative to get engaged into account abstraction research. So yeah, feel free to reach out. A lot of people, I see a couple of account abstraction developers in the audience also. So yeah, let's push together forward.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you.